Winston Churchill was perhaps best known for his role as Prime Minister of Great Britain during the tragedy and the triumph of the Second World War. But during the First World War, although his roles were more minor, they were still varied. He was First Lord of the Admiralty and oversaw a disastrous campaign in the Dardanelles. He saw active service in the trenches on the Western Front and finished the war as Minister of Munitions. But he didn't only experience war, he wrote about it as well. During the 1920s and 1930s, Churchill wrote this, The Great War, a huge tome of work. Published in 26 segments, fortnightly, this was received with great critical acclaim. In this tome, he covers all aspects of the war, the Western Front, the Eastern Front, the causes, the main characters, the home front, etc. In this new series, I'll be reading chapter by chapter this whole work. When there's illustrations, maps, tables, charts, I'll be adding them in as well. Now these books, they're not free of bias or propaganda, but Churchill does make some attempt to justify some of the actions he himself took. I really hope you enjoy this series, as this will be a new experience for me and hopefully for you. We're going to start now with the foreword. Thanks for watching. The Great War by Winston Churchill. Foreword. Writing the 6 volumes of the World Crisis occupied my leisure during 10 years. They have been translated into almost every European language and separately presented in the dominions of the British Empire and throughout the United States. Together they form a complete general account of the Great War, its causes, its course, and its consequences. Now for the first time they appear in a form which will make them accessible to a very wide public, and I venture upon a brief foreword. The causes of Armageddon lay deep in European history. The long antagonism of Germany and France was kept alive and aggravated by the German annexation of Alsace and Lorraine against Bismarck's better judgment after the Franco-German War of 1870. The power of Germany, once she was united into a military empire, became enormous, and with that power grew also a resolute national will among all classes of Germans to win for the German race an almost undisputed ascendancy, not only on the continent, but throughout the world. To this they bent their industry, their science and their valour, and from the beginning of the 20th century, the might and ambitions of Germany lay heavy upon Europe. By a series of unwise acts, the German Emperor and his successive chancellors first estranged the Russian Empire by championing the interests of Austria, and next alarmed Great Britain by creating a fleet intended to rival in size and efficiency the British Navy upon which our national existence depended. Thus first Russia and then Great Britain associated themselves in their common disquietude with France and her sleeping desire to recover her lost provinces. This led to the growth of an informal but nonetheless vital association, known as the Triple Entente, which faced the balanced Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria and Italy. As Germany became more closely linked with Austria, the divergence of Italy towards the Entente in her old friendship for England became probable. Europe was thus divided into 2 mighty groupings, rapidly arming and each holding together for mutual protection. The Central Empires, Germany and Austria, endeavoured to disrupt the association of the Triple Entente on various occasions, and the revolution in Turkey, the ceaseless unrest in the Balkans, and the internal stresses of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy provided many dangerous conjunctions. From Algeciras in 1905 to the annexation by Austria of Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908, from the Agadir incident in 1911 to the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, the situation grew steadily more dangerous. There never was any possibility of the English, French and Russians forcing a war upon the Central Empires. But by 1914, they had all reached a state of mind in which they would not allow themselves to be sundered from each other, and would probably resist unitedly if attacked. When general war suddenly exploded, and all the great armies and fleets were mobilised and matched against each other, we passed by a terrible transition into a different world. Hatreds which had slumbered for centuries burst from their tombs, and nations, which apparently had no concern in the main quarrel, hastened eagerly to join one side or the other, until in the end even the United States, China, and Brazil were all drawn in. As for the British Empire, it marched almost to a man. From every quarter of the globe, the British race hurried to the battle lines. So also came willingly the martial manhood of India. Britain became a great military power, with armies in the field numbering eventually 5 million. Her wealth and credit sustained her allies. Her navy seized from the first moment and held to the last the command of the oceans. Her diplomacy and influence gradually ranged almost the whole world against the Central Empires. Her will to win never flagged, in spite of every mistake and every misfortune. The willpower of England animated the whole alliance, and broke and conquered the Kaiser Wilhelm II, as it had broken and conquered Napoleon and Louis XIV. As usual, we took the roughest road, and perhaps the longest, but our strength did not fail. In the end came victory astounding in its completeness. The German armies, which had invaded so many countries and won such tremendous victories, lowered their weapons and sued for an armistice. The nation that had set out to dominate all others was reduced to beg for grace from the victims of its onslaughts. In the convulsion, the Russian and Austrian empires perished or fell to pieces, and even Germany herself assumed for a time a republican, parliamentary and democratic guise. The aftermath was bitter. The foundations of the civilization which the 19th century had achieved were shaken or riven. The economic life of the world was deranged, and all mankind had passed into a state of flux, upon whose surface no pattern or design appeared. Once the firing stopped, the victors found themselves in a pit of misfortune, only less deep than that into which they had hurled their defeated foes. Our tale, therefore, recounts the greatest of human catastrophes since the decline and fall of ancient Rome. 2 questions will haunt the mind of the thoughtful reader. Could it have been prevented? Will there be another? I shall not pronounce the answer to either. Every man must judge for himself, but the study of the numberless facts and events here set forth in their chain of causation will be, I sincerely believe, a good guide to a true judgment.